Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We've got a lot to talk about in this midweek episode, including a couple of penalties handed down by NASCAR yesterday, the TV numbers from Atlanta, and our first edition of driver single race ratings. However, before we do that, I just wanted to go back and discuss something that I realized yesterday after having some time to digest what the drivers said following Sunday's race. We all watched the thrilling race Sunday in Atlanta. As I mentioned in Monday's video, it was action from start to finish, beginning with the Lap 2 crash, which was the biggest in Atlanta Motor Speedway history that involved 16 cars, and ending with that 3-wide photo finish. In between, there was plenty of racing action, including a record number of 48 passes on the 1.5-mile hybrid superspeedway, which surpassed the previous record of 46 passes set in the 2022 spring race. After the race, the drivers were all raving and complimentary of the racing product. Here's what Kyle Larson had to say on Twitter. "That was the most fun I've ever had in a drafting race. Extremely intense. Hate bad luck got a hold of us again, but happy with our execution in these first two races." Even Denny Hamlin, who had every reason not to be happy with his day after being involved in 3 incidents and earning a 23rd place result, was pleased with the overall product.
If anyone has a negative feeling about it, it probably should be me, but I've watched enough of the highlights. I've seen some of the wrecks firsthand. It was exciting.
I focused on those two drivers specifically because their perspective after Sunday's race was a dramatic departure from what they had to say in 2021 when they learned about the new reconfiguration of the track. Take a listen to what Larson had to say back then.
Yeah, we're gonna go put on a good show, no matter how the track is. But yeah, I mean, we have more experience than the fans, I guess would be the argument that I would have. I've raced at hundreds of different racetracks, and I feel like we would have a better understanding of what really makes good racing. But fans like crashes, and a 40-foot wide surface is going to keep us tight together. So, maybe that's going to accomplish the good racing that we think it is.
Ouch! Calling out the fans. Denny Hamlin didn't take on the fans, but took direct aim at Speedway Motorsports Incorporated. With all due respect, this same group has reconfigured Texas, Kentucky, Bristol with 0 driver input. One of those lost a race, other one we don't race anymore, and last one we put dirt over it. But hey, what do the drivers know? What do the drivers know? I guess my answer would be A, and most importantly, they know how to race. They know what they believe makes a good race, and they know what tracks they believe produce good races. Notice how I used believe in there twice? Believe or opinion. In other words, the drivers might know what it's like to race on hundreds of different tracks, as Larson said, but that doesn't necessarily qualify them to predict how a modified track design, or in this case, reconfiguration, will turn out. To Dale Jr.'s credit, he was insistent from the jump that the use of iRacing was going to make the Atlanta product better. He was right. And to be frank, the drivers, they were just wrong. I think this is all a cautionary tale for fans in the future when a track is going to undergo some sort of change, whether that's a repave or a reconfiguration. It might be best to take a wait-and-see approach until the track is done and competitive laps have been completed before passing judgment. Because, as we learned at Atlanta, the drivers don't always know what they're talking about. Moving on to our next item, and it's a couple of items, the penalties handed down by NASCAR in its weekly penalty report. Let's start with the big one, and it's a familiar name. As I mentioned in my Saturday video, Stewart-Haas Racing was potentially in trouble when officials confiscated the roof rail deflectors on the number 41 and number 10 cars. It's never good when NASCAR confiscates anything before a race. On Tuesday, we found out a couple of things. First being the penalty, which was the loss of 35 driver and owner points, which falls in the L1 category, and the fact that it was an L1 penalty, because it wasn't a single source supplied part, but a team supplied part. The penalty itself is noteworthy, but I think the bigger story is not necessarily the pattern of bad behavior, because we know everyone is trying to be creative in the garage, but the fact that they keep getting caught. SHR has been penalized 4 times in the last year. It started in late May of 2023, following the Coca-Cola 600, when officials announced the most severe penalty in its system for the number 14 of Chase Briscoe, who received an L3 penalty after the team was discovered to be using a counterfeit part. Briscoe was docked 125 driver points and the number 14 team 125 owner points. Crew chief Johnny Klossmeyer was suspended 6 races and fined $250,000. A couple of months later, it was Cole Custer and the 00 Xfinity Series team receiving an L1 penalty for using an illegal splitter. And then in October, after Kevin Harvick finished a close second behind Ryan Blaney at Talladega, the number 4 car was disqualified for loose windshield fasteners. What's incredible is this penalty to Harvick came almost a year to the day after being penalized at Talladega for modifying the deck lid, a single source supplied part, which included the docking of 100 driver and owner points and earned Childers a 4-race vacation and $100,000 fine. Moving on from the team that gets penalties on the regular to one that seems to never be in NASCAR's doghouse, Team Penske. Joey Logano was also on this week's penalty report, which some might find surprising, considering he was penalized in Sunday's race by being sent to the tail of the field at the start of the race and serving a pass-through penalty. But those were for a competition violation. What came out in the Tuesday report was for a safety violation and included a $10,000 fine, which was consistent with other safety violation penalties, including Chandler Smith last year receiving a $10,000 fine for not wearing a head sock during qualifying. Unsurprisingly, Logano's web glove has been a hot topic of conversation this week in the news and on the various podcasts, including the Dell Jr. Download, with Earnhardt talking about how he appreciated the creativity. Kevin Harvick said something similar on his new Happy Hour podcast, but made another interesting comment. Take a listen.
I love the innovation part of our sport. I love the creativity. Yeah. It sucks when you get busted. Mm-hmm. But when you think of things that other people aren't doing, to me, that's a feather in the cap. And I think that's a feather in those guys' cap because I heard that it was used for multiple years.
Multiple years? I know there were plenty of people talking about how Logano reportedly used the glove at Daytona, where he sat on the pole. But no one has publicly said anything about the glove's usage before this year. If what Harvick says is true, which there's no reason to believe it's not, you have to applaud Logano for being able to keep it under wraps for that long. What I also found interesting about the Happy Hour podcast is what wasn't said, and in my opinion, it was disappointing. Harvick talked about the Atlanta race and Logano's penalty, but there wasn't a single mention of the penalties to the 2 SHR cars. I get it, he's a former SHR driver, but if you're going to talk about the race and the penalties that came from it, it's not a good look to conveniently leave off the bigger of the 2 penalties just because it's your former team. Moving on from what the new Fox on NASCAR broadcaster and what he had to say about the Atlanta race to the Fox on NASCAR television ratings from Atlanta, and it's impressive. I didn't mention last week's number from the Daytona 500 just because it was a rescheduled Monday race, and I thought it would be comparing apples to oranges. However, this week's numbers are much more relevant because it provides 2 key numbers. How the race compared to last year's Week 2 race from Fontana, which I think is the more significant of the 2 because it's a more direct correlation, and then the numbers from Atlanta, which are definitely solid, but for a race that was a month later in the 2023 schedule. In either case, it's encouraging to see the numbers go up, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come. Next week should give us a better idea because it will be a direct comparison to last year's Vegas race, which was also the 3rd race of the season. Sticking with Fox and NASCAR, I just wanted to point out something that happened over the weekend during the race, and I was reminded of it yesterday during the Dell Jr. Download. Earnhardt revisited his tweet on Sunday where he was quite vocal about Fox's production and the close-up shots on the car. Here's what he had to say. The camera shots are too tight. Can't see everything. There is a blank ton going on out there. His tweet was brought up on this week's podcast. Take a listen.
I'm not picking on Fox. I'm not saying they do things differently than NBC did things. I am always of the opinion that getting more cars on the screen is a good thing.
Right.
The more cars you can put on the screen, the more I, as a broadcaster, can talk about.
Maybe, just maybe, with Redneck Jesus speaking out about it, Fox will respond and pull back the cameras in the upcoming races. We shall see. And finally, my last item is on a project I've been working on behind the scenes for my website, and I'm happy to report it's now live. I call it my driver single race rating. I know Jeff Gluck's Good Race Poll is popular, but I've been thinking for the last couple of years, why isn't there a way to see whether or not a specific driver had a good race? Now, any NASCAR fan knows that a good race for a specific driver can be challenging to identify. Let's take Todd Gilliland and his race at Atlanta, for example. Gilliland had what most would consider his best Cup Series race, qualifying 4th and leading a race-high 58 laps. He finished 10th and 6th in the stages, but he finished 26th after getting involved in an incident late in the race. His 26th place result isn't an accurate reflection of his overall race. That's where my friends over at wintherace.info come in. Their True Performance ranks provide a truly objective assessment of a driver's performance from start to finish and take everything into account. Using that data, I've compiled a fan-friendly rating system where we provide a driver with a simple rating of +1 for a good race and -1 for a bad race. The formula is simple and calculates the driver's rating based on their average TPR and average finish on a certain style of track like super speedways, and adds that to their previous performance on that specific track, like Atlanta. That number is then divided by 4 and we have our baseline number. After the race, Win the Race provides their latest TPR numbers and we can compare whether a driver finished higher than their baseline, +1, or lower, -1. What I'm expecting will happen throughout the season is we'll be able to see various trends develop. And at the end of the year, we'll be able to add up a total score and it will give us a sense of how a driver performed throughout the 36 race schedule, because those who were consistent will have numbers above 0, while those who struggled and had a lot of bad races will have a negative number. Should be interesting to follow. I encourage you to go check out the ratings on my website and see how your driver has done through the first couple of races. You might be surprised. All right, guys, that's all for this episode. Let me know what you think about the drivers singing a different tune about Atlanta after Sunday's race. I also want to know what you think about the penalties, and more specifically, what did you think about Harvick's remark on Logano using the web glove for years? Also, do you agree with Junior about the Fox cameras getting too close on the shots? And what did you think about the TV ratings from Atlanta? As always, if you want to see my written work, go check it out at heavy.com. And finally, when you're checking out the driver's single race ratings at beatenandbangin.com, go sign up to receive our weekly email newsletter delivered each Friday that provides you with all the news you missed during the week, as well as a recap of what was said on the various podcasts. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and hope you have a great rest of your day.